Welcome to the Healing Grove podcast. I'm Dr. Kristin Ryman, an integrative holistic family physician, author of Life After Lyme, and host in this virtual space of learning, healing, and growing. I believe humans are like trees, and our physical limb is only one of many. Health on all limbs of the tree, emotional, conceptual, social, spiritual, is absolutely required for the whole tree that is you to be vibrantly well. I created the Healing Grove podcast as a place to showcase some of the world's best integrative and holistic medicine, to expose you to transformative tools and mindset shifts for all limbs of your tree. I hope you enjoy our conversation in the Healing Grove today as much as I enjoyed having it. Hey everyone, welcome to the Healing Grove podcast and welcome to a beach in the Aegean Sea.
Is that how you say it? Aegean?
I actually have no idea how to say it. I've been saying Naxos and Shanusa and the Cyclades, but I don't even know. I haven't really looked up how to say it. So it's Greek to me, and I'm going to be swimming it rather than saying it. And
it's literally Greek to you.
It's literally Greek to me. So this is a different podcast this week. We are doing a special series, which is a single episode series on my swimming adventure, because it was getting really confusing for people why they were seeing so many swimming logs on Instagram. And in fact, my unofficial board of directors, which is all made up of 24-year-olds and under, and all happen to have my last name, were like, "Mom, how come you're talking so much about swimming? What does it have to do with being a doctor or treating Lyme disease or even mystery illness for that matter?" And I was like, it's a fair question. But I do think there's some overlap. And you agreed with me. So everyone, this is Nicole DeBoom. If you saw the very first trailer for my podcast, you'll remember Nicole. Nicole and I went to college together. We swam in college together at Yale, and we've remained friends since. And she's a total, wonderfully amazing, inspiring human that I'm so glad to bring back on the podcast and have her interview me about this crazy swim journey.
Well, so Kristin, yes. First of all, it is very hard to talk about yourself in front of a microphone. Just sit there and dissect yourself. So you have to bring in somebody, and who better than somebody who watched you when you were in your actual swimming glory days, then took the 30-year break. We came back together over time, and it's been really cool to watch your evolution. But what's even cooler is to watch how sometimes the patterns, like, they diverge and then they come back together, and things that you never expected to happen may happen. And so they can only happen when you're open in your life to allowing cool things to reoccur. So I am so grateful to be here to talk about this, because I'm also experiencing a bit of reoccurrence in my life and getting ready to pursue something that I never thought I would pursue again. So this is all resonating so well with me, perfectly timed.
Awesome. Well, I want to come back to that because I want you to share a little teensy bit about what's going on with you. But one of the reasons I'm also really excited it's you interviewing me, Nicole, is that, well, aside from the fact that I just love hanging out with you on Zoom or on an Aegean beach or wherever, is that you have been an inspiration for me through my whole adult life around exercise.
Okay, so that's really interesting because, yes, when I got to Yale as a freshman, there was this class of women 2 years older than me that I called the Blonde Amazon women. And it was like 6 or 8 women in the junior class who all were like 6 feet tall or roughly thereabout, had hair down to your butts, almost all blonde hair down to your butts, except Katrina. Love you, Lundstedt. Shout out. She's still swimming too, isn't she? You were amazing. You were all amazing. And you led the troops, right? So when you say like, yeah, you inspired me. Well, guess what? When I got to Yale, you, Kristin, inspired me. So this is all circular, right? And I got to watch you go out there and be a beast in the water. And that's how I first met you, was as a swimmer. I didn't come to know you as a healer and a doctor and all these amazing other things that you would use in this world to help others. I knew you as a swimmer. And I still like, that's how I think of you and thought of you, even if you didn't think of yourself that way for decades in between. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. What else is funny, Nicole, is that, and this is all, I'm all kind of revisiting this recently because I've been back in the water for the last 6 months, but I'm remembering like all the moments in which I was sort of navigating my swim career and sort of trying to figure out where I fit on the team. Because what my role was to be really, really fast at the end of the season. And throughout the season, as a person training, I was never that fast person. I was never the person to beat. I was never really leading the lane. I was in the sprint lane, which got more rest and had longer intervals and, did more sprinting. But I never felt like I was a beast or a dominant force. And then at the end of the year, I swam really fast after a taper. And it's been interesting because we had a recent reunion with Yale women's swimming and diving, actually all swimming and diving. It was 125th year anniversary of Yale swimming and diving, which is pretty remarkable. And it was cool. There was at least one person from every swimming graduating class since 1970 there, and a smattering of people from earlier. And there was a former Olympian's family donated one of his gold medals. I mean, it's a big deal. We celebrated our former coach who died last year, Frank Keefe. And it was powerful to be around that whole culture again and that whole, ethos. And one of the things that occurred to me was that actually I was a really fast swimmer. And I don't think I ever thought that when I was at Yale.
Well, it is interesting when you up level to a bigger pool. Literally. And, it might be actually really interesting to dig back in deeper and start at your swimming roots, because Yale, you didn't just show up at Yale as like a pretty good to amazing swimmer. Like it happened earlier. And I think what we want to get down to is, where did this root of love for swimming begin? Why did it go away, and how has it reemerged?
That's a
So
great,
let's talk about it. When did you first get tossed into a pool?
well, I moved to California from Cleveland when I was 4. I don't think I experienced a pool prior to that, although who knows what happened before age 4. As we know, the conceptual psycho-emotional squeegee happens and everything starts over and the brain starts recording again around 5. And in California, we had a pool in our backyard. And one of my favorite things to do was float. Just float forever. I remember lying on a floaty and closing my eyes and spinning myself around and then waiting until I came to a stop and trying to guess where I was in space. I mean, that was sort of how I spent my summers. And I was a swimmer sort of naturally, but not a competitive swimmer until I hit high school, actually.
Okay, so you loved the water. When did you start working out in the water?
I mean, I think there was a flash in the pan moment when I was 12 or 13, when a neighbor friend was like, hey, there's a swim club down the road, Fig Garden Swim and Racket Club in Fresno. Why don't you come join? You guys are members, just come swim with us. I swam for the summer when I was 12 or 13. At the end of the summer, there was one meet. And it was back in the day when you had to fill out these like pink and blue Jello pudding pop branded cards that had your name for every event and your times. And I was so confused by that process. And my family wasn't swimmers. My parents didn't know what the heck was going on. I was kind of on my own. I was so freaked out that I was like, I'm out. And I just quit like before the meet. Like the administrative duties basically just made me want to check out. And I guess that's maybe the beginning of another theme. But the bottom line is I was like, I can't do it. And then 2 years later, when high school started, I began that summer again and realized I was pretty fast. And it was fun, and I made friends, and there were all people in my neighborhood and people who were going to school with me. So it just became kind of my social thing that I did through high school and subsequently got really, really fast by the end of high school.
So you don't just get fast by accident, usually. I mean, there is some work that goes into it. And I want to hit on like that whole no pain, no gain kind of thing, like, yeah, there's one thing to just love spinning around in the water and then go out because your friends are doing it and you want to socialize or you have a crush or whatever,
All
but
of the
there's
above.
another. Yeah. But when you become good at the level you were, and you became national level good in high school. So do you remember a flip switching where you were like, all right, this is my life. This is who I am. I am a swimmer. I go to the pool and I work out.
It's funny. I don't remember that flip or that switch rather flipping. I do remember early on though, feeling that way, like feeling like this is my sport. Like this is what I do. And I think it actually started when I started back up. It just, and maybe that's part of what pulled me back in. Someone said, you have a lot of potential and you could, do something with this. And I liked all the people still. It was, for me, it was so much more about relationships and fun. And I was good at it. So that makes, fun begets more fun and work begets more work when you're good at something, I think. But I
Well,
don't
for
remember
sure.
that moment. Yeah.
Well, and when you're good enough to have a sport or a talent kind of help recruit you to college, is that how your selection of Yale, was that led by, I'm going to go check out colleges for swimming and academics?
It wasn't really. I'm almost embarrassed to admit how unintentional I was about everything. I sort of floated through. I was probably, I loved Berkeley because Berkeley was, a really cool hippie campus and it just felt like my place. And I figured I would go there. And I figured I would not swim because I wasn't fast enough to swim for UC Berkeley. But then my junior year, my mom became ill with cancer. And my dad wanted to take us on a tour. Actually, he wanted to take us to the East Coast to see Bernie Siegel, who was a surgeon who was becoming famous as an author for talking about healing cancer, sort of naturally and with your mind and positivity. And he wanted to take my mom to that conference. And he invited me along. He said, hey, why don't we go look at some colleges on the East Coast? And I was like, there's no way I'm going to the East Coast. It's cold. People dress like that LL Bean catalog, which I just don't understand. And I think they swim indoors and they're all snooty. Like I had all these preconceived notions being a, California Valley girl. And we went out east and we went to the conference and then we went to Brown and we went to Harvard and went to Princeton and we went to Yale. And actually Yale was so interesting. My dad would call Yale and like the day before we got there was like, hey, my daughter's coming through. Is there any chance we can hook her up with an interview? And they were like, you mean for next year? Because we're booked until next year. Oh, wait, actually, no, someone just canceled for tomorrow at 2:30. Do you want her to come? So I showed up for this interview at Yale completely, randomly / not randomly, and took a tour. And I remember the moment, talk about a switch being flipped. I was walking down Whaley Avenue and walking towards the gym. And all of a sudden, I just had this feeling that I belonged there. I was like, oh, this is where I'm coming to college. I wonder if I can swim here. Like, you know what I mean? It wasn't like that was driving anything.
Wow. Gut feelings.
Yeah. Yeah.
Listen to your gut. All right. I love it.
Totally. Yeah. Which I think we talked about on another podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And more.
So,
So,
yeah, that's what it was for me. And it wasn't until I, kind of had that experience that I started hearing from, I think we might've even walked into the gym and talked to Frank, yeah, we did actually, because I remember my dad and my stepmom sitting in this office, or my dad and my brother actually sitting in this office together. And we were like looking around and trying to figure out, like, is this a place where I want to swim? It seems like it's indoors. Like, I don't see the outdoor pool. Like, what's up with that? And Frank sitting there with his, 3-day-old socks and, the couch and, chatting us up about what it would be like for me to be at Yale. And I was like, all right, if this guy will let me swim here, I think this is my fit.
that is so cool. I actually had the same feeling about Yale. It was like a
Really?
gut feeling. There were all these great choices. You had choices. I mean, you were academically strong enough and then had this little magical side hustle of swimming that you kind of had your choice. And you went off gut because at the end of the day, many of them were probably could have provided a similar, not experience, but you get it. They were all on the same level.
Yeah.
So I feel like that in itself, gut leading you to where you are in your life, that's really cool too. Well, let me tell you, when I was a swimmer at Yale and got to experience swimming with you, um, I was always truly in awe because, well, you're one of the kindest, most open, vulnerable, honest, real people that I had ever met in a different way than I'd known anyone. I experienced your aura. And I just always held you up as somebody special. I just knew you were special. You were also safe. There was something just so safe. And I think it was this feeling that whatever you did, there was no judgment being passed from Kristin Clegg, now Ryman. And I'm sure you've talked on this podcast about marrying the other captain of the Yale swim team. Have you?
I did marry the captain.
Well, I was like,
So
yeah,
yeah,
you did.
so Greg Ryman was captain our junior and senior year. I was never actually captain, by the way. I
Oh,
was I considered I was sort of more the unofficial masseuse and
you made
spiritual
people
leader.
feel good.
Yeah, I made people feel good, but I was never, a lot of people thought I was the captain. I wasn't the captain. I actually didn't want to be the captain. I really didn't want that. Maybe it goes back to the whole administrative role and maybe not my strong suit to be sort of an admin, leader of sort of organization in that way. But I really felt like my role was a leader from within, from within the group. But Greg was the male captain, and we men and women swam together at Yale, which was awesome. And he was the captain for the last 2 years. And yeah, he and I were friends for all 4 years. And it wasn't until our senior year that I kind of just started looking at him in a different way. And I was like, maybe this guy and I are supposed to be traveling cross country for 6 weeks after college and seeing if this is something. And it turned out that it was. So yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing. When I think of you as a swimmer, I always remember you in the sprint lane, and the sprinters, I was like, are they even doing anything? You just swim like more than 1,000 yards. Like, you guys didn't swim that much. But here's kudos to the Yale coaching squad and team, is that back in our day, it was all about high mileage still for everyone. And so the fact that they actually were on the cusp of honoring that sprinters operated differently, I think is actually really cool. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was always like, those sprinters, I want to be in that lane.
Yeah.
So I was like, God, they barely ever swim. And then they're super fast in the meets or at the end of the season, like you said. I guess my point in bringing that up is that you have publicly stated that you do not love exercise. Yet, for not loving exercise, you were a nationally ranked swimmer who was competing against some of the best swimmers in the country. So to get there and possibly be, fighting an internal conflict, which is to get there, I must work hard in the pool and must exercise. That must have actually been kind of hard.
Yeah, it was really hard. And actually, I think that's honestly what kept me away from it for 31 years in the aftermath. I really felt like there was some, I don't know, trauma. Is it too big a word to say? Maybe trauma with a little t, or like a T made out of pointillism. It's not like terrible, terrible things befell me that I didn't have a choice around, but I chose torture often twice a day for 8 years on behalf of this larger vision, which was, often only accomplished in 1 or 2 days a year at the end of the year for me.
I mean, did you have shame around the admitting of guilt? Like, I don't like exercise. I mean, you literally, it feels like, and you said this, you made a confession,
Yeah.
and that signifies that there's guilt
Yeah.
somewhere in there.
Maybe a
Tell me
little bit
about
of
that.
shame. Yeah, a little bit of shame. I mean, so as a doctor and as a person who really cares about health and really understands kind of the pillars of health, and exercise, of course, being one of those pillars, I felt a little bit out of integrity, kind of, well, first owning up to the fact that I really hate exercise, and then just acknowledging that to myself, living that truth. It's really always been true. And it's been so interesting getting back in the water, because what I'm revisiting all of the little strategies that I had growing up and, my teens and 20s that helped me kind of get through that initial hump, that energy of activation that you have to get over to actually be doing something that you want, maybe not to do or be doing, but to have done an hour and a half, 2 hours later. So yeah, one of those tools is just don't open your eyes. Just start walking to the car or walking to your swim bag. I don't put my suit on before I get there. I don't want to wake fully up before I get to the pool at 5:30. Like I want to get to the pool and be like, okay, I'm not driving home now. Put my suit on, put my goggles on, stop thinking, don't talk to anyone, because then I have to be consciously aware that I'm about to do this to myself, and then dive in. And once I hit the water, like after the initial shock of cold has worn off, I'm like, oh, thank goodness I made it. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. But the hardest part for me is that sort of that hump that you have to get over to actually get myself to do the thing.
You know, I would guess that 90% or more, maybe 99, maybe 100% of former elite swimmers, the number one thing we will never miss is diving into a cold pool at 5 a.m. And it is the thing that will keep you away, just thinking that that is what's looming even the night before. It can trigger anxiety. So I hear you on that piece. And I love that you're digging back, you're digging into your bag of tricks from the past. What else? What
Yeah.
other tricks?
Well, the other thing is I don't make it negotiable, because if it's negotiable in the morning, I will negotiate myself out of it every time. So people, I showed up, I started swimming in November, and I showed up at this master's team. Nobody knew me, or maybe a couple people did from my kids' summer swim. And they were like, oh, you're here. I'm like, don't talk to me. Get in the water. I could chat with you at the break. But really coming every day has been the way for me to keep doing it. Because if I had that internal conversation every morning, it would not be happening.
Okay, so what was the catalyst? I mean, you didn't just one day wake up and go, I'm going to start doing masters again. That makes no sense.
No, it
Zero.
makes no sense. So it's a funny story. So this was last summer, the end of last summer. Well, let me go back. The last May, so a year ago, I got reconnected with my class of Yale women's swimmers and divers. And it happened because one of them, the brunette you mentioned earlier, got married after like 15 years of dating the same guy, got married, eloped. And we were like, wait, what? You eloped? We are coming out there to have your bachelorette party, your posthumous bachelorette party. And we all flew out. 6 of us went out there, and we had a big bash for her and got reconnected. And the experience of being reconnected with my team, it wasn't my whole team, it was just my class, but the experience of being reconnected with these people was like, oh my gosh, we lived through hell and high waters together, and we were each other's family for 4 years. How is it that it's been 30 years since we have like voluntarily come together and reconvened? This is not going to happen again. So of course I started a book club, and we started reading books and trying to meet on Zoom every month and just trying to stay connected, and sort of committed to next year we'll do something again together. This year it ended up being that 125th year celebration, which we were very sad you were not at, Nicole DeBoom.
Sorry.
We understand. You were on a beach, which is important.
I'll give you all my excuses later.
So, so I had already become reconnected with these girls, and just really delighted to have them back in my life. And about 3 months after that initial gathering, Erin, one of our group, reached out to the little thread and said, hey, my daughter's graduating from med school in May. I'm taking her on a swim trek to Greece. There's 14 spots. Who wants to go? And I was, conflicted is maybe not large enough a word. I was like, okay, that's awesome. You're awesome. I wish I were as awesome as you. There's no way in hell I am doing that, because that would require 5 a.m. practices and training and basically becoming a swimmer again. And I am not doing that. But what I actually did was say nothing and just wait 2 weeks, and then go on the swim trek site and look it up, and all the spots were filled. So I, on this thread, reached back out to Erin, was like, Erin, how could you dangle this in front of us? Like, all the spots are gone. What happened? She's like, oh, well, I didn't hear from any of you. And so I put it out to all my friends who swim masters with me, and we're all going together. And I was like, oh my gosh, how could you dangle this in front of us? I totally shamed her on the group thread. So a month later, she texts back to the group, hey, Kristin, the spot just opened. You want to go? And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to go now. And so I clicked the link, I ran it by the family, and they were like, of course, go, go, go. and I hit send. And then I was like, oh my God, I have to train. And the next day I went to masters and I haven't looked back.
Okay. There is something so important about the power of saying yes, right? I mean, no is the obvious answer from most people when something like this would come up. It's asinine. No, of course not. I couldn't. What? I'm completely ill equipped. And what's kind of cool is that you had some time to think about it, and then the option was withdrawn from you. So you experienced some regret and FOMO, right?
Totally.
So it's the power of saying yes. I mean, if you hadn't said yes, you wouldn't have gotten yourself back in the pool. And when you got back in the pool, something more than just going to Greece happened because you did the Greece trip, right?
I leave tomorrow.
No. Tomorrow?
I leave tomorrow.
Oh my God. Okay. So let's talk about the process that has led you here and what you've rediscovered.
Well, I've rediscovered that there's a reason I didn't swim for 31 years. And it was the memory of all that pain and, all of the suffering and all of the kind of feeling compelled to do it. Right. And I'm learning that master swimming is a kinder and gentler swimming. Master swimming is whatever you want it to be. My first day there, I showed up, I was like, where's the slow lane? And I got into the slow lane with two lovely ladies who welcomed me. And one of them said, look, I'm here for fun and fitness. I was like, those are great mantras for today. So I just would sort of pick a mantra. Like sometimes I would be looking at the wall. We had this funny little thing on the wall that looks like a beehive with all these little kind of islands. And I was like, there's Greece, there's the Greek Cyclades where I'll be swimming amongst. That's my focus. Or I would, there was another swimmer who often would say that just was magical, sort of sarcastically, I think, but I would take it and be like, you know what? There was magic in that. Let's figure out where it was. Or I was focusing on my core, or I was focusing on a flip turn, anything to kind of not get too aggro about it. Because the one thing I will tell you is that I'm a very competitive person, which I don't think I knew or remembered until I got back in the pool. So
That
all
is
the
so
things
cool.
that I'm doing to like manage that have been also hugely informative.
Well, and think about this. You could have just gone and been a lap swimmer, but you knew that you needed to do this with some kind of tribe who you actually, it sounds like, didn't know really anybody in the group. Because there's a difference between being one of those crazy lap swimmers and being a crazy master swimmer, right?
Yeah.
And you knew that you needed another carrot to get you to the pool every day, which was the accountability of a group, right?
Totally. And the accountability of a practice, there's someone in the group usually who throws it up on a WhatsApp, thread every night. I've stopped looking at them because I found that they interfere with my ability to get there in the morning. If I look at them, getting to the sort of anxiety you talked about earlier. And I just show up and I just keep telling myself, like, find your bliss in this lane, in this practice. It doesn't have to be the whole practice. It doesn't have to be the same interval. It can be whatever you need it to be to kind of keep moving forward.
How many days has it been?
I stopped counting, but it's probably been about 120.
Okay. You've been doing this
of
for
swimming. Yeah. I mean, it's been since November, the middle of November. So it's been 6 months.
wow. Okay. So 6 months of consistent swimming. Usually it's 2 weeks is the usual dropout rate for any new added activity or diet regime or whatever. It's like 1 week you're kind of on a high, and then the second week it gets hard, and then you're like, I'm out. So how did that whole process go? Obviously you pushed through.
Yeah, I pushed through. And part of it was that, about 3 weeks into it, we went to Arizona. And I was in Arizona then with my son, Malin, who was a competitive swimmer at Harvard and graduated a couple years prior and has just gotten back into swimming himself. And so he's a big motivator for me. So there was also my niece, Allie, who was a 5th-year senior at UC Davis playing water polo. So the three of us basically went to this beautiful outdoor pool for all the days we were in Arizona that it was open and swam with a master's team there, long course. Which was a whole other up leveling in my, because for sprinters, long course, there's no flip turns in the middle. There's no, it's a little bit long. harder. It's a little bit harder. But yeah, I think just finding my accountability in everywhere I could, and also posting on Instagram. I'd started this Instagram channel last summer for my business and talking a lot about Lyme and a lot about mystery illness, a lot about, gut healing. And then I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to use this as my accountability buddy. This is my little Instagram, my group of invisible Instagram friends who hopefully will show up and hold me accountable to this journey. And they really have. It's been really awesome to have all their comments and feedback, and kind of a lot of people saying, I was so inspired when you said you hated exercise, because I didn't know there was someone like me. And the more and more people who have talked to me about, they're like, oh yeah, nobody likes exercise. Like the process of the whole thing is not what you're doing it for. And I was like, oh, I guess I just never really understood, because some people really seem to like it. Like you really seem to like it.
Well, that's a really good topic actually to bring up, because I do think not every minute of exercise is joyful. But there are times, if you're out on a hike in the beautiful, trails of the Rocky Mountains on a gorgeous day and feeling good, there's joy in that,
Yeah.
right? But if you're trying to slog up a hill and the rain is pelting you and whatever, that sucks. You're getting
Yeah.
through it. But there is something about the after. And I wanted to ask you about this. And I encourage everybody to check out your Instagram, because you're so real, and it's so nice to see you out there talking. But there's a whole thread that you did about your morning workouts. And there's a few where you're just like, yeah, it was, today was good. It was better than I thought, whatever. But there was one where you were like, I really wasn't sure if today was going to happen. But then you said something really cool. Do you remember what you said?
No.
You said, I wasn't sure I was going to get out here, but I'm glad I did.
Mm.
And that to me is the statement that's what sums up exercise. Most days, many days, especially if it's like a structured workout and you anticipate there will be some pain involved, many of those times you don't really want to go, but afterwards you are almost always glad you did.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's actually one of the things that one of the swimmers I now am friends with in this master's club said that really stuck with me. She said, you never regret going. You never regret having gone. You might regret missing it if you don't go, but you're not going to regret having swum in the morning. And
You
that's
won't.
really, really the case.
Here's another thing too. Sometimes you can get frustrated with a workout. I remember being at yoga when I was starting yoga like 10 years ago. And I was like, oh, this workout just wasn't hard enough in my head. I was like, this sucks. I'm not getting what I want. And at the end of it, I was doing the shavasana, and you're just laying there and kind of letting it wash over me a little. And we got up, and this woman goes, you know what? You get what you're supposed to get that day. And I was like, oh, that totally changed my mind from getting what I think I'm supposed to get that day to what I'm actually supposed to get, which was a more gentle day or whatever it is. So I think like allowing yourself to go with the flow in the process of exercise, and the reason to do exercise is so manyfold. It's not just for your physical health, it's for your mental health. I mean,
Oh,
have you seen a change since you started?
so much so. And that's, I think, almost the most unexpected and delightful part of this whole process. I started swimming in the dead of winter, right? It was like end of November. And, it's not the easiest time for me. I get seasonally affected. I have to use a happy lamp. I'm just kind of flat through the winter usually. And I felt my heart crack open. Day 3, I'm swimming home. I'm driving home from swim practice, and I put on some music and I started singing, and I sing back and forth to swimming every day. It's just part of my vagal toning routine. And I just felt my heart like crack open, and I just started sobbing and weeping, and it was delicious. And it wasn't sadness. It wasn't pain. It was like just overwhelming gratitude and happiness to be able to use my body in this way. It was really powerful. And I feel like it made this winter very, very different for me than past winters have been on the East Coast anyway.
There is definitely oxytocin in the air, right? Isn't that it? Or is it endorphins? One or both.
Can be both things. Yeah.
um, I got a call from you partway through this process, and you were like, I have to share something with you. I can't even believe it. You're gonna die. And I called you back and we had a conversation about your first swim meet back after 30 years. Do you want to share that story?
Not really. I don't know
You have
why.
to share a little blip.
Yeah, I'll share it. I'll share it. I mean, it's uncomfortable to share it, but that's usually a reason I should do things. So I went to this meet because everyone on the team, like, and these are all, there's 20 somethings to 60 somethings, and they all have jobs. And I didn't really understand, like, again, I was just sort of trying out masters to see what it was for me. And I still don't really understand what it is for everybody, but they're pretty committed. And even the woman who said, I'm here for fun and fitness, like, don't stress my buzz around anything else. Even she started saying, hey, there's a meet in February. Are you going to come to this meet? And my first thought was, hell no, am I coming to a meet? Like, I don't need to dig all that stuff up. I don't need to get on a block and like fall off and break my hip. Or I don't need to like put expectations on myself. I just need to survive Greece. Thank you very much. So I thought about that for about a week, but there was this little part of me that was like, come on, don't you kind of want to see what you could do? Like, don't you want to just jump in that water? I mean, you are a sprinter. You could like rest the 3 days prior to the meet and maybe actually do something. Plus, in masters, you can swim short distances. Like, there's a 50 breaststroke.
There's
Nicole.
100 IM.
And I did it. I did the 100 IM. I did the 50 fly. I did the 100 free and the 50 free. And which is a lot for one afternoon. And I was nervous and I was excited, and I went out and bought a racing suit, like bought something that wasn't the 3 baggy suits I was wearing together for my my usual. And yeah, it had our little like shark fin logo on it. And I got a matching swim cap. I got all, suited up, and not tech suited up, not a $400 purchase suited up, but like, I'll look like I'm a real swimmer for a day. And I invited my family. Greg wasn't going to come. He was like, I mean, why? This is master swimming. Like, isn't your team going to cheer for you? I'm like, no, I want you there to cheer for me. Yeah. He came for the 50 free, and they put me on 2 relays. So my goals were very clear, because this whole thing for me has been about like, just make an appropriate goal. Like, I want to survive Greece. I want to not have to have the boat rescue me, halfway through 5,000 meters of swimming on day 2. I want to just not get injured. Like, those are my big goals, right? And I want to, it also turns out my goals were, I'm going to like work through this old residual garbage in my head about exercise and about swimming and about whatever, the trauma. So all those goals were being met. So my goal for the meet was, I want to not break stroke during my 50 fly. And I want to not fall off the block. When I'm up there.
Those are realistic. They were very realistic.
Yeah. And I smashed those goals, meaning I did not fall off the block, except when I was diving at the appropriate time. I think I even did a pretty fast relay start, meaning I leaned and left the block right when their hands touched. And they had hot heats, which is a funny thing in like age group swimming, which I never did because I started when I was 14. But in age group swimming, my kids have all been through it. They occasionally will just randomly pick a heat in which they'll blast music. So the swimmers don't actually know they're in a hot heat, because it starts after you hit the water and you can't hear anything when you're swimming. And then at the end of the thing, whoever won that heat will get to pick a little rubber ducky. So as it happened, all of my heats were hot heats, and I won all of my heats.
You got a bunch of rubber duckies.
I came home with 4 ducks. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And guess what? You were fast.
I was faster than I thought I would be. Yeah, I was faster. I'm nowhere near what I was, but I am still pretty fast, turns out.
How did it feel to go fast?
It felt like no time had passed.
Wow. The thing I love most about this story, and when I heard it the first time and I'm hearing it again, is just this joy of allowing yourself to surprise yourself. You surprised yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I did.
And then you walked away going, what do I do with these new emotions?
Yeah,
Do I
that
take
then
this?
and actually I stopped posting on Instagram after that because I stopped posting regularly because I was really conflicted about that and I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it and I didn't have a clean narrative and it was all in my head about it. You know, like everyone on my team came up to me and they're like, "Okay, why didn't we know you were fast and are you going to come to US Masters Nationals in June with us? We have a house and you're actually fifth in the country right now in your age group for this and this." I'm not anymore. That was the beginning of the season. But basically like all and by the way, you should be practicing in a different lane. And I was like, no, 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 no.
Well, because it's pressure, because then it becomes performance related, and that was
Right.
not your goal.
Right. So I will say there was like probably a month where I was I mean, US Nationals, Master Swimming Nationals is still on my calendar because I threw it on there. I was like, okay, it's going to be on there. I'm going to think about this. I'm going to let it percolate. And at the end of the day, I just realized I don't want to do that. Like, I don't need to go compete in US Nationals. I can just enjoy what I'm doing and do what I'm doing and do it the way I want to do it and make those micro decisions, right? Like maybe next year it'll change. Maybe in May it'll change. So far it hasn't changed, right? But
Well, because the initial catalyst for you to get back in the water was to go do an international experience in warm water, swimming open water with a group of women, moving your bodies and enjoying a new place, right? It was like
exactly.
it's a celebration and it starts basically tomorrow when you get on the plane. And that is this realization that like, whoa, I'm actually a competitive swimmer again. Like that is who one of the things that you are. That has nothing to do with Greece. So I can see why there was conflict there. And like,
Yeah.
I love that you process it to the point that you do. But here's the other really cool thing is like we like to define ourselves in our lives by a lot of things, often by what we do. You know, I see you, yeah, you're a doctor. That is a thing. You are a healer. That goes beyond being a doctor, right? You are an athlete. You pushed that away for a long time,
Yeah.
but it's here again and it's knocking on your door and it's like, hey, remember this part of you, me? Like, open up. I want to peek back in. I want to be part of you again.
So true. I almost am crying just hearing you talk about it that way because that's really what it's felt like. It's felt like this piece of me that was actually a major part of who I was and am that I had ignored.
You ignored and you had other physical setbacks that didn't really allow you to open up. You
Yeah.
know, you had other things you had to tackle in your life, but guess what? She's here. She's back.
Yeah.
The blonde Amazon woman from Yale. She's back. She can go into beast mode or she could just cruise. It can be either way. Like, that's so
Mode,
cool.
bliss mode, beast mode,
Yay!
bliss mode. It can be two things.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Well, so here's the big thing that this comes around to is how do you use what you have recently uncovered to help others and to move yourself forward?
Mm. I think the move myself forward, we've already talked about. I mean, I feel like, you know, anytime you can dredge up and look at honestly and then transform old trauma, I think that's powerful and you're moving forward. And I feel like I've been doing that unwittingly. It wasn't what I signed on for this for, but it's been a beautiful side effect of the journey. As far as helping others, you know, I'll be honest, I started sharing on Instagram because I wanted an accountability buddy. And I knew that if I started there, I would have to continue there. So it was one more thing that kept me showing up. But one of the happy side effects of that is that a lot of people have come to me and said, this is so inspiring to me. I'm so grateful that you're sharing because it's inspiring me to get back in the pool or me to get back into exercise, or it's helping me kind of validate those uncertainties and realize that doesn't discount me from moving today. Like that shouldn't rule out the possibility that I can be an athlete. And, the fact that I lived through all that I lived through is also, I think, very hope filling for people. People feel like, wow, if she can go down that hard with Lyme disease and she can lose 30 pounds and not be able to walk and, not be able to pick up her kid and then, recover enough to get back in the water and be competitive and whatever that is for you, right? I think people find hope in that.
Yes, they do. There is hope. And there is always something you can do. And that's what you're sharing with us in this world. And I love it. You're so
Mhm.
magical.
Oh my gosh, that's the word I use for you always. My magical friend, Nicole DeBoom.
Oh my gosh. Do you have any other musings you want to share about this next chapter? What are you going to do after Greece with your swimming?
Well, I'm going to clearly keep swimming.
Cool. I love it.
That's the other thing. Like the friends I've made are now tentatively asking me like, are you just asking for a friend? Are you going to keep swimming after Greece? And I'm like, how could I not? I mean, it's not been about Greece for the last 4 months, Greece is like now this fun cherry on top of the last 6 months, but to me, this is my sport and I've re-embraced it.
Wow. It's funny when we talked, you were like, do you want to do like Masters Nationals? I was like, no, I want to do a Greece trip. Make another cool destination trip and I'll come and commit and I'll do it. That's part of the fun.
Yeah.
Build it into your life adventure and make it active, because when you work and move your body and you're doing a transformative like experience at the same time, it like implants more strongly. I think it's like the body and mind have to come together, and then the experience is just, it's wildly more powerful, my opinion.
Really. I think if you're going to do anything, especially the hard things, you got to do it with joy. You got to find some joy in there that drives you.
Yeah.
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 Speaking of, I want to talk about before we end, just because I didn't know this before we got on the call and you shared with me, something's coming around for you again. It hasn't been 31 years for you, but there is an exciting exercise-based chapter of your life that you'd sort of set aside for a while that you're about to open again. Will you share that with us, Nicole, before we finish?
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to. So, after Yale, I became a pro triathlete, hence the whole like exercise ramped up times 100, because it was a job and I traveled the world doing that and pushing my body. And towards the end of that career, I came up with this idea to create something that hadn't existed before that would theoretically help inspire me to work out and enjoy my fitness life. And that was basically, it was symbolized by the running skirt. I created the first running skirt, but really the point was I wanted to create great fitting, super cute but high performance products, and so I created a company called Skirt Sports. And it was the wildest, most amazing ride of my life. 15 years running that business and learning every day. And it was based on fitness and fun and passion. I mean, all the things we talked about today. But like happens with many good things, I got tired and I started wondering if there was something else out there for me. So I decided when COVID hit and the company was like kind of having some COVID issues that I would relinquish the brand and move on. And so I sold the business 4 years ago and moved my family. And in 4 years, I have done what I've learned in the psychology world is called sampling. I've sampled. I've tried. I wanted to reinvent myself so badly and like be something completely different. I was like, maybe I should become a pottery, maker, or, just something so out there. And I haven't found a thing that has resonated. Okay. So a few months ago, the new business owner decided to wrap up and discontinue running the business. And because of that, within the past couple months, Skirt Sports has now been transferred back to me to decide what to do with. And so as we talk about opening back up to old chapters, but potentially doing it differently and with a whole base of knowledge, it's a pretty exciting thing when you actually put your head to it. So instead of trying to sell the business again or find a different way to activate it, I have decided that I am going to reactivate the community and bring Skirt Sports back to the world and not let it die forever. And it feels really good. There's going to be some fun challenges as we go, but I'm actually inspired to take it on again. So you'll be seeing a little more of me out there these days. I went dark on social 3 years ago, and guess what? I'm going to have to come back.
Awesome. Well, let me know when you're ready, and we'll do a little collaboration event on Instagram to share to my audience what you're going on there, because that's really exciting. I know when you guys went into business, I bought up a bunch of stuff that still serves me well. It's such great equipment.
You know,
the
when you
body.
make great products, they can last a really long time. And before I make anything new again, I'm actually going to launch a community for women to resell or share or give to a second life to their existing closets. You came up with a great name. We're the Closet Raiders. I don't know what I'm going to call it yet, but that's the point. It's about connecting, and it's about finding things that make you feel good. And at the end of the day, look at this whole episode was about connecting for you and finding things or rediscovering things that make you feel good.
Well, this conversation has made me feel awesome. Thank you so much for being willing to have this chat on the beach with me.
Yay, me too. Go get them in Greece. Can't wait to hear.
Me neither. We'll see what it does, but it's going to be fun. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Healing Grove podcast. If you liked it, please be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to deepen your experience further, consider grabbing a copy of the Healing Grove Playbook. With journal prompts for this podcast and 41 others, it's the perfect place to record your learnings, keep track of the tools you explore, and reflect on your own experience. Finally, it's important to mention that even though I am a doctor, nothing you hear on this podcast, whether from myself or my guests, constitutes medical advice. Any intervention you try should always be discussed with and supervised by a trusted member of your own healing team. Thanks for listening, and see you next time in the Healing Grove.